Okay, so we are on Nun Aleph Amid Beis. We're getting very close to the end of the sugya, to the new Mishnah, and we touched on some very interesting topics last week, which we'll pick up and conclude today. So we're actually only a few lines before the Mishnah, where it says Tana Rabbanan. So just as an introduction to this morning, last week we concluded, because we were talking about Rav and Shmuel and the Machlekes Reb Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, and how they align. And we were trying to reconcile that Rav holds like both, Shmuel holds like both. So at the end of the discussion, the Gemara made a distinction, and the Gemara said that, without going through the whole Machlekes, that there is a distinction in how you word the statement, whether you make a sort of general statement or you make a specific statement, whether or not oinor can be sort of precluded from the discussion. And the lashon that the Gemara uses is, and we'll just get it here in front of us. The Gemara says, the difference between a stam statement and a mafurish statement. So what does stam mean? So stam means where a person does not articulate in the discussion about whether or not there is onah. In other words, I'm selling you something, but there's no discussion about whether there's onah. That comes later, whether there is onah or not. And then we say that if there is onah, of course, it's you have to reconcile, either dismiss it or not. And if there's not onah, there isn't. And that's maybe most of the cases that we experience stam is stam. In other words, I make a transaction with you, and it turns out that later on there is onah because it's off by a 6 or more than a 6, whatever the case is. And then whatever we say comes into play. But now, what about mafurish? So mafurish, as we ended last week, is a case. If I say to you, we're friends, I'm selling you this for 200 mana, but you should know it's really only worth 100, but I'm selling it to you for 200. You can either say no or yes or quibble, but you have no taina to me later. You sold me something and it was oinah because it was mafurish. Now you're going to say, well, that's silly, of course. But believe it or not, I mean, that happens where two people negotiate and one is willing to pay. It's rare, it's whatever the case may be. And vice versa with the lokeach. Says, I'm only paying you 100. I know it's worth 200, but I'm paying you 100. So those cases where there's a mafurish, there cannot be an oinah. And that's how we distinguish between mafurish and stam, again, to reconcile. Go ahead, yes.
Okay, so yesterday in Rabbi Grossman's class, we were talking about Kedushin, and we were saying a ring shouldn't have a stone on it because we didn't want to worry about the estimated value of the ring. And so we said that we're worried that the woman might feel that she was cheated because the ring wasn't worth as much as she thought it was, right. And the estimate. Does that all tie into here? Do they bring that into this discussion?
Not directly, but it's the same thought. In other words, it has nothing to do directly with oinah, but it has to do with Chazal generally want to make it simpler than more complicated. So in other words, when you have a ring and it's a simple round ring, it's easier to estimate because, again, once you have the grooves and the stones and everything else, now you add layers of valuation, and that could make it more complicated. And again, with Kedushin, we have to be very, very specific. When you have a round ring, it's easier to estimate. That's the general principle, which is why that's what we do for Kedushin. We don't have any ornate rings other than just a simple round ring. Kind of, we're saying the same thing, but not in that vein, by saying that we all know that Onoa is Min Torah, that you can't cheat somebody, you're not allowed to. So if you do it stam and you don't know it, and then it turns out that there's Onoa, okay, there's Onoa, but there's no underhanded intent. But when you come out right in the open and you say, I know what this is worth, but that's not what I'm selling it for, then the buyer has a brera. You negotiate, you say, I won't buy it or whatever. And again, because it's an Issa D'Oraisa, that's why the Gemara is saying we have to be as specific as we can, but it's along the same line, Scott. In other words, that it's a Torah ordained mitzvah, and we want to make it so that it's not controversial. In the case of a ring, just be simple and don't and this way kedushin, because kedushin, by the way, when you talk about mitzvah saseh, okay, it's one thing to have a fraud. You have a fraud. Okay, not a good thing. But kedushin has to do with arayas. So if we understand that if for some reason the marriage doesn't chal, there could be isurim, there could be questions of birth, the questions of other issues. So we have to be doubly careful that by kedushin and by inyone arayas that we do not have any misunderstandings. That's why we break it down to its simplest component and say just a simple ring. Everybody understands it, and that's why under the chuppah we've all seen this. Usually the Masada Kedushin. Why do we have Eidei Kedushin? Because they have to witness the event of the chosin giving the kala the ring. The protocol is that the Masada Kedushin turns to the witnesses, shows them the ring, and say shava pruta, and they have to answer that it's in their estimation it's a shava pruta, meaning has at least significant value, that he's giving her something of value. It doesn't have to be extravagant, it has to be something of value. That's how important it is to ensure that the process works smoothly and simply. And once you have the stone, then one aide may say, yeah, this is worth this, and this one will say this or that. Again, it may not ultimately affect the kedushin, but it's going to create an issue. And we're trying to be as smooth and as simple as we can. So in a way, Scott, they are tied, but they're not the same. It's not the same principle behind it, the same issue. Anyway, so the Gemara now, that's where we are. When you articulate very clearly what your intent is, no one can misunderstand, and you cannot later claim, oh no, that there was fraud. Okay. Now we're going to go to the Tana Rabbanan, which picks up on that. And there was David or someone asked the question, maybe Jay, I don't remember, asked the question about ribis, right? We asked the question about ribis. So now we're going to, this will be a very interesting discussion on this final piece of Gemara. Tana Rabbanan. So the rabbis came together and they learned as follows. The Brisa says as follows. Hanose v'hanosim ba'amona. If someone does business on amona means trust. What does trust mean? Trust means that I say to you, let's say Menashe, I have this item. I want you to be my shaliach, and I want you to sell it for me. I'm not going to dictate what the price is. You're going to sell it for whatever the price is. I'm going to give you a fee to be my representative. And whatever you sell it for, that's fine. I will have no tana on you for oino if you sell it less than what I may imagine it is, and vice versa. If you make a killing and come back with a huge sale, you can't come to me and say, you owe me money. Okay, that's a very simple case. Says the Brisa. So if someone trades on trust, so besides trust, there's a second concept, and that's the concept of shaveh. What does shaveh mean? Shaveh means, for example, I have an item, I know what it's worth. I know that on the marketplace, this item sells for $100. So I'm not the salesman. I have to travel. I come to you, Menashe, and I say, Menashe, this is $100. Go out in the marketplace, sell it for whatever you can get. You just have to pay me $100. You can sell it for $200, right? And I have no taina to you, but I get $100. So that's kind of what we understand to be a consignment, right? Because when you sell on consignment, you agree on a fee, and then the store or whoever it is sells it for you, and their profit is the difference between. Now, why is there a profit here? Because 100 is kind of the marketplace, but everybody knows that this is a valuable item and probably can sell for more than 100, but that's the baseline. All you want is the baseline. I want $100. And this way, I have no cheshbon in my mind. I'm going to get $100 for it, and you're going to sell it for whatever you can and make the money. That's called shaveh, right? Okay. Says the Brisa, very interesting. I have two types of items I'm going to sell: a cheaper item and a more expensive item. I can't come to you and say, you know what, the expensive item, I want you to sell it for b'shaveh. In other words, you give me $100 for it, sell it for what you want. But I have a batch of cheap items, which I know the marketplace is not going to grab, but eventually they'll all sell. Those you can sell ba'amona. I'm going to give you a fee, a flat fee, and you sell them. Sell them for whatever you can. But in either case, there's no no. We're not, in other words, since we articulate now that a person can say that I'm selling you something and there's no no, right? That's what we said, but mefurish, I'm being mefurish. I'm telling you that a shaveh you're going to sell for $100, whatever you make, and the amona you're going to sell for whatever you can sell, and I'll compensate you, and you go ahead and sell it. So we have two different items for two different valuations. Says the Brisa, don't do that. You can't do that. You can't sell half of it ba'amona and half. Why not? So we have to understand what's really happening here. So let's take a quick look in Rashi, and Rashi will explain to us what really is happening when you say half ba'amona and half b'shaveh. So the Rashi says, "Harizelo yechashav lo." It's the in the narrower lines before they get wide. Rashi says, "Lo yechashav lo esaro be'amona v'esayafa b'shaveh lias lo amtanach maos hayafe b'schar torcho gon shehoyu lo shnei yanos yafe sheyesh lo olav kavtzim lelachai bevas achas." So basically, he's dividing it that you have a batch of items that you can sell very quickly for a certain amount of money. V'hara, and that's the yofeh. V'hara she'en nimka ela b'chanut, but the lesser quality, which you have to really sell retail. You got to go around and you got to pound the pavement till you sell them. Lo yoma lo. So he shouldn't say to the shaliach, "Harilcha yofeh b'shaveh." I'm giving you the yofeh for the fixed price. And here's the kicker. Amenas, on the condition, shetimker li hara b'chanut, on the condition that you sell the ra b'chanut, because the yofeh he'll sell right away. That's a no-brainer. But he's got to work hard to sell the lesser quality, because that's a tougher sell, right? Kama shetuchal, for whatever amount you can make. I'm not giving you a parameter. Sheyimkar, and when you sell the shvacha stuff, the lesser quality, tenli mo shneim. In other words, you're going to sell the good stuff in a week, but it's going to take you a month to sell the shvacha stuff. So I'm going to say like this: sell the good stuff. Don't give me the money. Hold on to the money until you sell the shvacher stuff. And when you sell it all, then you'll give me all the money. So now what happens here? Okay, so then you'll give me more shneim. Upota asmo b'mtanach mo shel demei hayofe melose schar torcho al hara. So you know what the deal is? The deal is because I'm going to give you the opportunity to take the money from the good stuff and use the money, right? You're going to sell 10 items for 100 each. That's $1,000. Take the money and use it. Do business with it. Do whatever you will, but you'll give me that money, that $1,000. I mean, it could be you'll make 2,000 or 1,500, but you have use of the money, and don't give it to me until you sell the shvachara stuff for whatever you sell it. And then you'll give me all the money, but I'm not going to pay you the flat fee for the money because the use of the other money is in lieu of my giving you a fee, right? So in other words, my advantage is that I don't have to pay you a flat fee for selling the schwachere stuff because you're going to get to use $1,000 or $2,000 from selling the good stuff right away, and that'll be your profit. You'll make money, you'll invest, you'll do different things. So you'll make money, and I'll make money because I won't have to pay you. Says Rashi, have a kiribis. This looks like ribis. This looks like interest. It's not the actual ribis, but why is it interest? Why does it look like ribis? Because he's taking advantage of an item. And again, the idea of ribis is that I lend you $100, and that $100 what you have to pay me back. But if that $100, the payback is more, then I'm collecting ribis. So kind of what's happening here is I have to pay you a flat fee, but I'm not going to pay you the flat fee. Why? Because I'm giving you use of money that you don't otherwise have. You can make unlimited amount of money. That looks like ribis. So the kasha here is it looks like ribis. You can't do it. Yeah, Jay.
Aren't we opening up a can of worms with this kind of crazy example? If things get lost, sure, he has the money and he loses it. You know, it's onus. What kind of a shomer is he really when he says, you keep the money, you can use it, this and that, but it's still my money. So in effect, he's a shomer of one.
Well, he's a socher. In other words, he's a socher because he gets to use the money, and a socher is chayiv on certain things and potter on certain things. I mean, is it Geneva, Aveda? Is it Pshia? In other words, each shomer has a different level of shomer chinam is only Pshia. Shomer socher is Geneva.
He's also, but it's also split in terms of shomer. He's also shomer for the other stuff, the Chinese stuff that has to get sold.
Well, but he's not really a shomer because he's getting paid. Once you get paid, you're no longer a guardian. You're now a businessman, and a businessman has a different grade of responsibility to the original owner than does a shomer. So if let's say he's responsible for Geneva and Aveda, let's say, and someone steals his item, then he's chayiv. He's chayiv because he's doing business, he's making money. You have to have a level of responsibility. If you do it for free and you don't get any money, then the level of responsibility is much less. It's only pshia. You were careless. But if someone breaks in and steals it from you, I have no taina. So the laws of shomer do apply in any case to someone who is getting stuff on consignment to do business, because now he's a socher. Now he's a businessman, and a businessman has to act according to the laws of halacha in business. So they really do comport, because it all depends on how do they get lost, what happened to it, as to whether or not he's chayiv. But what's happening here is that because he is saying, you're going to forgive me my paying you for the lesser item, because I'm giving you a huge opportunity to sell the expensive item, which will sell very, very quickly. It'll fly off the shelf. You'll sell it right away. And you have use of the money. You don't have to pay me anything until you sell the weaker item. And that could be quite a bit of time. And the use of the money, says Rashi here, is ribis. Because it appears that he is making a profit off the other person's quote unquote loan. I mean, it's a sale, but he's lending him the money to be able to use it. And so it's ribis. So this is the kasha.
You have to have a transaction of buying and selling before ribis comes into the story.
Well, there has to be some action. Yeah. So normally ribis is I lend you the money, and then you pay me back more. That's ribis. That's in the classic sense of ribis. Here, there's no ribis until there is actually something has to trigger. The trigger here is the fellow saying to the person he gives it to on consignment, you've got this money. Now, if he gave him the money right away, that's a simple transaction. He gave items for $1,000. He sold it for 1,500, gives him back the 1,000. That's a simple transaction because the idea was that he would make a profit by selling it beyond. There's no ribbis there. That's very transparent. The ribbis comes in because now it's an unlimited amount of time. It could be a week, a month, a year. Who knows how long he'll have use of the money. And that use of the money is what would constitute ribbis. Again, not classic ribbis, but the appearance of ribbis because he's making a profit on what someone else, quote unquote, is lending him. He's selling it to him, but it looks like a loan.
Can't he override the perception by saying something or writing something that this is not ribbis?
No, but the ribbis triggers when there's a quid pro quo of not paying him for the sale of the other merchandise. I mean, you could say anything you want all day long, but because he's taking advantage of giving him the use of money, because there's an exchange of no payment for the other part of the work you're going to do for me, meaning the weaker stuff, you're not going to get paid a flat fee, which you should. And if he does, then there's no ribbis. But if you don't get paid for it, then it appears that he's lending him the money for the expensive stuff, and he, the seller, is taking back the benefit of not having to pay for the weaker stuff. And that's what Rashi here is saying appears like ribbis. So, and that was the guy, someone asked, Michael, someone asked last week, that's ribbis. And the answer is not classic ribbis, but this is what the Gemara says. Rashi says over here, how can you do that? The reason why you shouldn't do a mixture of Shaveh and Amona is because of ribbis. And the Gemara goes on to say, Ela ozeh v'zeh be'amona, ozeh v'zeh be'shaveh. Either make up your mind, either sell the shvach or the good stuff with Amona, meaning on faith, for a fee, or b'shaveh, or with a fixed price. Once you sell it for a fixed price and the guy sells it for whatever he wants to sell it, then we're free and clear. But when you mix and match, and then you say, and the benefit to me is I don't have to pay you for it because you're going to make money on the other end. So instead of making money from me on a flat fee, it's not the sale. Let's get it clear. It's not the sale of the expensive item for a higher price that triggers the problem. What triggers the problem is that he says, you don't have to pay me for that until much later when you finally sell out the weaker stuff. So in a sense, he's saying, you have to do this for me, even though it's a tough sell. The only way you're going to make your money on the good stuff, which you're going to make good money, is by selling the weaker stuff. So he says, okay, I'll work hard on the weaker stuff. But in the meantime, he has all the money from the good stuff, which is in his possession, which the owner is giving him unbridled use. And that's how he makes a profit. So he says, instead of making a profit on the fee that I'm going to give you for the weaker stuff, make your profit on using the money from the shaveh. That is the problem that potentially triggers ribbis, because then there's this exchange for which there appears to be a benefit. And again, ribbis is an issur d'oraisa, and we're very careful not to have ribbis. That's why.
Does everybody agree with Rashi's way to view it?
Oh, wait a minute. Okay, so now we get to the big question. So the answer is no. Many of the Rishonim do not agree. So let's take a look at Rashi, and then we're going to look at a Tosfos that represents a lot of the Rishonim, and we're going to understand the depth of the problem. So Rashi goes on and says, Ela ozev zeh ba'amona, v'yitan lo kederach hanosim ba'amona. He'll give him the way you do ba'amona, schar kotzuv, hoyo lehem kin mefarish lekamen arba lemeya. In other words, there was a fixed fee, and that's the fee for amona. So he says that's what you should do. Ozev zeh b'shaveh, or do everything b'shaveh, v'haschar yeh shel mekabel. And the schar will be what he can basically receive for selling it on the open market. So that's what Rashi is further explains why you should do or one or the other. That's why. Okay. So Rashi says, what does Rashi say in the previous Rashi? It's ribbis, right? All right. So let's just finish this piece of Gemara and then let's go into the problem. The problem is, as Jay asked, does everybody agree? The answer is No, that most of the Forshim, many of the Rishonim do not agree with Rashi. And in a minute, we're going to see what Tosa says representing those Rishonim, why it's a problem. But let's just finish the Gemara itself. The Gemara says, now, in addition to selling the item ba'amana or b'shaveh, there are other fees attached, which are legitimate. V'noselo schar katof. So katof means that, let's say I have a warehouse and I keep my merchandise in the warehouse, and you have to move it from the warehouse to another location. So that's usually a fee where you hire someone to move it. That's called schar katof. That schar he has to give him. In other words, if he's going ahead and in addition to what he's doing to sell, he's got to either hire or take a donkey or hire someone to what we call porter. You got to bring it from point A to point B. That he has to pay. Schar gomel. He has to hire a camel driver to move the items. You got to pay him. Schar pundak. What happens? He has to move it to a faraway place, and he's got to overnight in a in a hotel or an inn or whatever it was called then, a pundak. You got to pay him. So in other words, there could be incidental fees that go along with this transaction. So the Gemara is telling us clearly those have no repercussion on the deal. In other words, that doesn't signify a problem because those are ancillary fees. And maybe you don't have to move it. Maybe you don't need an overnight stay. But it's the owner who should pay for that, not the hired hand. So those fees he can submit. However, says the Gemara, schar atzmo ein notel. In this situation, he does not take a schar for himself, meaning what we said was the underlying fee for almana. Remember, we said he gets a flat fee. That flat fee he doesn't get. Why? Because he previously paid him in full. Well, we'll see what that means. That's a separate issue. We're going to get to that in a minute. But basically, this Gemara now tells us that when you have that kind of situation of mixing expensive and less expensive stuff, you've got to sell it one way, either shaveh or amana. Those are the two common ways. You got to do one or the other and not a mixed bag. And we explained why. And Rashi says, because it is ribbis. All right, now, here's says Rashi, if he does it with amana, meaning a flat fee, because he's doing it on amana, on faith, when they hit the bottom line, he has to pay him for the movement of the items from the house to the warehouse, whatever, to the store. And if he needs camels, and also schar pundik. Okay, so that is now clear what the Gemara is telling us. Now let's take a look at Tosfos. Normally we don't look at it. We talk about it, but now we're going to actually look at it because it is of extreme interest to us. It's the second Tosfos from the bottom. He should not consider. He should not consider the Ra ba'amona. Pirish Rashi, right? In other words, he shouldn't do the shvachara stuff ba'amona and the shvach, the better stuff b'shaveh. That's what he means. Pirish Rashi. We just learned the Rashi. Rashi says shenlo is hara. He gives him the cheaper stuff. Umaminlo, and he has on faith kishim kerenu b'chanut when he sells it in his store. So in other words, presumably this fellow had a retail location where he sold item. Maybe it was a dollar store, and he put all the shvacha stuff in the dollar store, and people came and bought it. That's how you sell. The better stuff you don't necessarily have to sell that way because you have a ready market of people who right away want to buy the better stuff. But the weaker stuff you actually have to sell in the store, and people have to come and whatever. And again, maybe there's negotiation because he sells it for $1 and they don't want to pay $1. And the seller says to him, get what you can for it. I'm not going to hold you liable for if you sell it for 50 cents or 60 cents or whatever it happens to be. So says Tosfos here, Kamo sheyuchal as much as he can. Shalom lo es hayofe b'shaveh kamo sheshava achshav. He'll sell him the good stuff for what it's worth today, achshav lemachro miyad, because he knows that that price, if he holds on to it maybe for a week, it'll become more expensive because it is an item that's desirable. So if today's price is 100, and I say I just want today's price, I know if you hold it a week, you're going to make 150, and the consignee knows that too, so he'll make his money right away if he holds it just a short time and sell it for more money, right? Umamtin lo mos hayofe, and this is the key. He tells him, the seller says to the consignee, hold umamtin lo mos hayofe, hold the money from the yofer at sheyimka hara, until you sell the bad stuff. B'shvil shetorach lo lemocha hara b'chanut b'ma'at ma'at, because the fellow will sell the weaker stuff in the store b'ma'at ma'at for less and less money. V'zehu ribis, says, and that he's quoting Rashi, that Rashi says that's ribis, because therein lies the problem, as we said before, because I'm negotiating, not taking, I'm not paying you a fee for the weaker stuff in order for you to use the money that you accumulate from the better stuff for a period of time, and that's what appears like ribis. That's the real issue, and so that's what Rashi points. Says Tosfos, this is on behalf of the other Rishonim. So I mentioned last week, Bekosha, this is shver. Why? The Beperik Eza Neshech. Eza Neshech means talks about interest, and it's the next parak in Bava Metzia. Havalei la'asuye v'lei hocha. So it's a practical determination. Tosfos is saying, and so will other Rishonim, Rashi, why are you introducing a subject that has nothing to do with our Gemara? Our Gemara talks about Oino. This it should be an example of Oino, and you are saying it's ribis. You know what? When we learn Ezer Neshach, we'll talk about ribis. But don't talk about ribis now when we're talking about Oino. So I said last week that that's a very unusual answer, because they're chiding Rashi for introducing a subject matter in the Gemara that isn't relevant to our Gemara. In other words, Rashi, don't you know? It's almost like chiding. Don't you know that this is an Isser Oino'o, not an Isser Ribis? And if it's an Isser Ribis, wait until Ezer Neshech to raise it. It's an Isser Ribis. Why are you saying it now? So this is serious enough for Tosfos and the other Rishonim to rebuke Rashi and to say that can't be the reason. It can't be because of Ribis that we forbid a person to mix sales of Shaveh and Amona. That's not the reason, right? Okay, in other words, you may be right. It has something to do, but it has nothing to do with our Gemara. Our Gemara should be talking about Ono, that this is a fraud issue, not a ribis issue. Says Tosfos, Visu, and further on, B'Tosefta, in the Tosefta, what do we learn of the Tosefta? Masna legabe Ono. It says it about Ono. In Tosefta, it brings down this case, and it talks about Ono. So clearly, the Chazal, the Chachamim who were learning this Gemara, understood that the Amona Shava concept has a Oino quality, not a Ribis quality. It's not as if you're saying, oh, but for Ribis, there wouldn't be a problem. The Tosefta alone brings down and says this is a no problem. So they have so the Kasha and Rashi is, why are you introducing Ribis into a subject that purely is a no? So we're going to see in a minute how they. But you understand the Kasha. But this is a very unusual exchange between Rashi and the other Tosfos and the others, because it's qualitatively Rashi is making a statement. It's Ribis, and the answer is, sure, it might be Ribis, but that's not the reason why it's forbidden here. It's forbidden here because it's Oino, and we see in the Tosefta that they bring down specifically that's Oino. Why did you, Rashi, introduce Ribis? Introduce Ribis later when we talk about Ribis in the next parak. So it's a very unusual question, which you really don't see much of this kind of exchange, because it's kind of like rebuking Rashi, but with a sort of a backhanded rebuke. I mean, Rashi didn't know that Ezer Neshech talks about ribbis. Of course he did. But obviously Rashi felt that I have to bring ribbis into this discussion because ribbis is strong enough that I should raise it here. Anyway, you get the point that Tosfos and the other Rishonim didn't like the way Rashi handled it. Okay, fine. Now, so let's go a little further. Va'od. Furthermore, not only do we see that it's Ainor from the Tosefta, but Va'od shekvar noson lo scharo mashma shemekodem kvar lo scharo. So that means he had a schar from the very beginning. So how can you say it's interest? Interest means that in the course of a deal, I get a benefit from you using the money. But we see, what did the Gemara say at the very end? That's why I read it. At the end of the Gemara that we just said, it says shekavar noson lo scharo mishalim. He paid him from before, whatever that means. But if he paid him from before, there can't be ribbis now. Do you understand? In other words, if you accept that in this whole transaction he was already paid, he was paid. How, the Gemara is going to explain to us. But if he was paid, then the result of this exchange between Shaveh and Ainor can't be ribbis, because there is no ribbis when a person was paid before the deal. Ribbis means that he benefited something from the deal. His payment was as a result of the deal, and therefore it's ribbis. There's no ribbis here. He was paid in the beginning, and then I go ahead and he makes this deal of Shaveh and Amona. You're going to tell me that's ribbis? There's no ribbis here. Some of us are rebuking Rashi kind of in two ways. One, why are you introducing ribbis into a subject of Ainor? And secondly, there can't even be ribbis, because ribbis means that he was paid improperly from ribbis, but he was already paid before. The payment was totally legitimate. So what's going on here can't be ribbis, right? As a practical matter, because that's not payment. If it's not payment, it's not ribbis. That's what Tosfos wants to say. If it's not payment, it's not ribbis. Ribbis is only when you get the benefit of the transaction. The benefit of the transaction was paid in the beginning, so there can't be ribbis here. All right, so there's two interesting questions. Obviously, the Rishonim, Tosfos and the Ritva and others, were not happy with the way Rashi interpreted this Gemara. So what's the answer? So it says Tosfos, Venira, all right, let's go a little bit further in Tosfos. Venira Kepirish Rabbeinu Chananel. All right, so what's the pshat? So gets a little intricate. According to Rabbi Chananel, why is it Ainor? Now he's going to explain to us why this is a Ainor issue, not a ribbis issue. So let's follow through. Shekana yud devarim b'yud dinarim. All right, I'm coming to you, Menashe, and I've got 10 items. Here's 10 items. Give me 10 dinner for these 10 items. Right? That's what happened. Hey, hayofin shaveh kol echad dinner v'chatzi v'chamisha. There's 5 good and 5 bad. The 5 good you're going to go ahead and sell for 1.5 dinner each. Does that sound like Ainor? It sure does. I'm selling you 5 goods for 5 dinarim, and you're going to sell them for 50% profit on each. That's more than a sheish. You're over Ainor. Right there, there's an Indian of Ainor in a practical sense. Okay. Haroim, now, but remember, I sold you 10 items. Haroim, Einu Shavim Kol Echad, Kiyim Chatzi dinner. The bad ones are only worth a half a dinner. You're going to go whatever you can for them, but you're going to sell them, let's say, for half a dinner or less. That's Ainor too. That's Ainor on the other end. Because you paid me a dinner for the bad ones, and you're only going to get a half a dinner. You have a taina to me that you didn't, that's Ainor. So there's Ainor both ways. The 5 good ones is Ainor because I sold it to you for a dinner, you get a dinner and a half. And the poor ones, I sold for a dinner, you only get a half a dinner. So there's a double whammy here of Ainor. That, says Rabbeinu Chananel, is the issue here. That's why this is a case of Ainor, not ribbis. This is a case of Ainor because in selling in combination of Shaveh and Amona, You're mixing and matching two things, each of which is going to yield more or less than the legitimate sheish. That's how the Gemara explains this. I think it's brilliant how we explain it. So now it's very clear why this is a problem of Ainah, according to Taisvis and others. Shenosan ala ra dinner, ela b'shvil shegam hayofim nosan lo bedinner v'hava Ainah ela oizeh v'zeh ba'amona. So either sell them all b'amona, in which case there won't be Ainah, or sell them all for Shaveh. So, because remember, if you say it that way, there won't be Ainah. Pirish. Kulam yachad. If you sell them all at one time, Yechashiv kulam dinner, oizeh v'zeh b'shavim. Either they're b'shavim, imim karoim levadam, Yechashiv lo kol echad ve'echad b'chatzi dinner. Yimka yafim levadam, and if you sell the good ones by themselves, Yechashiv kol echad b'dinner v'chetzi. So if you sell them separately, you have a Ainah issue. But if you sell each of them b'dinar, and then this fellow either ba'amona goes ahead and sells it. Remember, if I sell everything to you ba'amona, and I say, whatever you're going to get a fee, sell it for what you will. There's no Ainah if he sells half of them for 1.5, which would appear to be Ainah, right? Or sells half of them for chatzi dinner, which would appear to be Ainah, because he's selling him each one for a dinner. He's paying him for that, and now you sell them for what you want. That's mefurish. We just got through saying right before, with mefurish, there's no Ainah, because you spelled it out. I'm selling you something for 200 that's worth 100. No, Ainah. I'm selling you something for 100 that's worth 200. No, Ainah. So if you sell them in one tranche, either be a shaver or be a mana, there can't be Ainah. That's what he's telling him. V'gam yechashiv schar kesef, schar atzmo in a notel. He can't take. He doesn't take shikvar nosalo scharo, and there's no question of whether or not he's making a profit beholding the money, because he paid him in the beginning. Remember, if you pay someone in the beginning for the entire service, the fact that he later has money at his disposal doesn't constitute ribis, because it's already a straight transaction. I gave you payment for the service of selling my good and my bad. You made your money. Now take it and sell it. The fact that he's going to hold the money longer than, right? In other words, the fact that he's holding the money until he sells it all out no longer has anything to do with ribis, because the ribis portion was vitiated when he paid him for his service. That's the payment. So you can't come later and say, oh, he held the money for another 6 months and he made money on it. That's ribis. That's not ribis. He made a business transaction. He paid him for it. And then he said, go sell it for whatever you sell it for and give me the money when you finish selling it all. So, but he's not taking advantage of the seller by saying, you're going to hold the money, and therefore that money will be in lieu of my paying you, because I already paid you, right? I paid you in the beginning, so there's no question. Says Tosfos then at the end here, so because when he originally sold it to him, he made a deal, and let's say it was b'shaveh. Let's say it was b'shaveh. So b'shaveh, he said, here's 10 items. You're going to sell them any which way you want. Yeah, some of them are going to be b'shaveh, some of them are going to be better, some of them are not going to be better, and I'm paying you $10, whatever he agrees to tell him. That's it. And the same ba'amana. In other words, whatever you in Shava, whatever you sell it for, that's yours. But Amona, whatever you sell it for, in other words, in Shava, there's a fixed dollar amount, but everything is b'Shava. But Amona, there's not a fixed dollar amount, but it's all b'Amona. The fact that it's all or nothing negates any question of Ainah, regardless of whether he says Shava for $100 or Amona for any amount, because he paid him for his service. Says Tosfos, that's why this is a kasha of Ainah, and we don't understand why Rashi doesn't say that, because Rashi says ribis when ribis isn't the parsha here. Ainah is the parsha. So this is a beautiful illustration of a different way of the machlokes here, in this case, the machlokes Rishonim, of understanding the Gemara. But at the end of the day, the Rishonim rebuke Rashi. Now, Rashi, for whatever his reason, he doesn't say it's not Oino, but Rashi wants to somehow highlight Ribbis. That may be a separate question. Maybe when we get to Ezaneshech and they refer to this Gemara, we may understand Rashi better. But right now, Rashi says nothing about Oino. He says Ribbis. So the kashi is, why, Rashi, are you saying Ribbis? It should be Oino. But bottom line, when you sell this way, the Gemara says, do not mix and match your sales, because you'll run into trouble. And the trouble, of course, is that you're going to wind up Oino, according to most of the Rishonim, and you shouldn't do it that way. So that is the pshat in the Gemara. Now, the final point of this Gemara, Scharo Mishala Mehecha Ko Yovle. What's the fee? The Gemara just came at the end of the Gemara and said, what? Shekvar Nosno Schar Mishalem. Frek the Gemara, Schar Mishalem Mehecha Ko Choshavle. Where did he pay him? I mean, you're plucking this out of thin air. You're saying that he made a deal with him and he said Shaveh or Mana, whichever Mana, whichever it was, and he paid him a fee. So the Gemara says, explain to me how and where he paid him the fee. I don't understand it. Says the Gemara, Omarav Papa, B'tzadroi. So says Rashi, B'tzadroi, Mocher Bigde Canvas. Rashi specifically says he sold him canvas. I don't know why it had to be canvas, but let's just say Rashi says he sold him a certain material, canvas. Seschar Kosov Lahem, that there is a fee in the marketplace, Litin Arba Lameya Mishatarach B'Michirasim. So it must have been an established practice that when you sold a canvas and you sold it, let's say Ba'amona, you sold it on trust, that it was, people knew that the fee for doing that was Arba Lameya, the Havaya Arba Lameya. In other words, he gave him 4, let's call it sheets of canvas. Let's say he sold sheets of canvas, or maybe he sold jeans. I don't know what he sold, but whatever he sold him that was made of canvas, 4 per 100 is the schar. So if you're going to say, I say to you, Jay, sell this canvas to me in the marketplace. People need canvas, but it may be a tough sell. Sell it for me, and I'm going to give you 4 sheets of canvas. That's your schar. Do with it. That's how you'll make your money. So that's pshat. He paid him right away off the top. Therefore, there's no question about any kind of oino or anything else, because the payment was clear. And he said to him, whatever you get, mufurish, I'll accept. So it's mufurish both ways. What happens if Jay, if you sell it and all of a sudden there's a run on canvas and you sell it and you make a windfall profit, I can't come to you and say, wait a minute, I gave you a 4, you sold it for so much more than I anticipated, you've got to give me the profit. There's no longer a discussion of oino, because oino was removed from the picture once I paid you a fee. So the fee is what is in lieu of profit, and therefore there's no oino. So what have we learned from this? Actually, the way we should understand this now is, having spoken about oino for a number of weeks now, there's an Issa d'Oraisa of selling something more than a sheish, or in according to Rahuna, in a circumstance more than a third, but by and large it's a 6th, the shtus. That's an Issa d'Oraisa. But there are exceptions to that Issa d'Oraisa, and we've now gone through it. And at the end of the day, we say that the most clear exception to the Issa v'ano, and by the way, la halacha, because I mean, oino is an issue, right? So today we're much more sophisticated in our transactions, but the way to get around oino is to be mafurish. In other words, if I do a deal with someone, you got to explicitly state the terms of the deal so that you can avoid oino. Sometimes it's with a fee. I give you the fee outright. That's one way. Or, we speak it out and we say, this is the transaction. You've got to understand how it works. And therefore, once we understand how it works, no one will be bent out of shape and no one will have an Isser. So as a bottom line, for any of us who are in such a situation where we're transacting, la halacha, that's what we have to do. we have to go to halacha. We have to avoid having a problem with shtus, so that there shouldn't be any aftermath later on. Oh, I made a profit. I didn't make a profit. Again, just like in ribbis, we have to be careful, which we'll talk about later. In Oinoah, the end of the day is shtus is an issue, and we know the halacha according to Rava that less than a shtus is not an issue. More than a shtus wipes out the deal, potentially, if you want. A shtus itself doesn't wipe out the deal, but requires the repayment of the difference in the shtus. That's halacha. And also the halacha is that you can avoid the problem of shtus, as we explain here in our Gemara, either by speaking out directly what the problem is, and there shouldn't be a problem, or by making it clear that even where you're doing it on consignment, which can create problems, there's no problem because I'm giving you a clear payment so that there is no longer a issue of shtus. So that's how we conclude this Gemara. Now, so Mitzvah will learn in 2 weeks, but let's just touch on this next Mishnah so you'll have something to think about, because there is another issue in Oinoah that we haven't even talked about. Now, we're talking about Oinoah in terms of a transaction between two people, right? And that's usually in goods. So Oinoah really appears in goods. When you buy and sell in the marketplace, that you can't, and I just thought of something very interesting, because Oinoah, what happens when a person buys and sells on a public forum, like a stock exchange, right? So my thought is, when you buy and sell on a stock exchange, you clearly, on appearances, can be over Oinoah. Why? Because you're buying something, albeit a representative of the item. You're not buying the item, but you're buying stock, which is the representative of the item, but you're buying it, and clearly there will be fluctuations where a shtus will happen one way or the other. So how do you avoid that? And so to me, it's an issue. It isn't an issue, but when you think about how in our lives we transact, this is one way that we transact. With l'chayra, we could be over shtus if you buy and sell a stock, because you're overpaying by shtus or underpaying. So I think the answer is, and again, this will maybe, we're now going to get into a different area of Oinoah, is that the fact that it's a public marketplace is the equivalent of being mefurish. The fact that you're buying it on a public marketplace, you're announcing to the world that there's no Oinoah, because I'm telling you in advance that I'm going to buy it for more or less than it's worth, or sell it for more than it's worth. In other words, the idea of mefurish, why that's so important, is because that takes it out of the ambit of Oinoah, and many things in our lives, and stock is to me as an example. If you didn't say it, if it wasn't, in other words, inherently understood that mefurish takes it out of the concept of Oinoah, then the chayra, buying and selling on an exchange, might be a question of Oinoah, because it's clearly more than shtus. So this is one way where the whole idea of mefurish takes it to a whole nother level, is that since mefurish vitiates the whole concept of Oinoah, so everything that we do b'mefurish doesn't have those repercussions, and stock is such a thing, where it's b'mefurish, because clearly everybody understands that in this marketplace of the stock market, or a public forum like that, there is buying and selling, and everybody understands that no one is standing on the concept of Oinoah. In other words, we're wiping out Oinoah. And that's something, again, that's why the halacha, we have to understand that mefurish does that in all the things that we do. If you do it privately and you're not mefurish, then you run into a problem of Oinoah. All right, that's just a thought, and I just want to raise that. Now let's take a quick look at this Mishnah, because the Mishnah touches on something different, and we'll just do the Mishnah quickly, and then Mitzvah in 2 weeks we'll go into it. Kamati hasela chasera v'lo yaboy no. Okay, this is something totally different. When you have coins in the marketplace, and let's say in our marketplace, we deal in quarters, dimes, nickels, pennies, and not in bills. Over a period of time, those coins are going to erode. In other words, you take a nickel, you take a quarter, and you pass it through enough hands, we know from looking at it that those coins become less qualitatively like quarters. And sometimes they're taken out of circulation when they become really sort of bad, not in appearance like quarters. Says the Mishnah, how much does a seller have to lose its qualitative appearance as a seller? No. In other words, the concept is, if a seller is worth a certain amount of money, let's say it's worth, I don't know, 10 dinarim, the Mishnah will tell us, let's say it's worth 10 dinarim or more. And now you use that seller repeatedly, and the seller loses its qualitative appearance. Maybe it's not worth 10 dinarim anymore. Maybe it's worth 8 dinarim. If it's worth 8 dinarim and you exchange that seller in the marketplace, then you have fraud. You have more than a shtus, because it's not worth 10 dinarim anymore. In the marketplace, it's only worth 8 dinarim because of the qualitative appearance of the seller. So it's something we haven't even thought about, but the Mishnah is now raising it not in the context of selling goods, but the actual coin itself. If the coin erodes and you keep using it, then it's no longer worth the face value of the coin, and that can raise questions of oino, of fraud. Says the Mishnah, how much does a seller have to lose, and it should not be oino? There's a machlokes here, Reb Meir and Reb Yehuda. Reb Meir says arba isoros. So this is just a denomination. 4 iser per seller, an iser lediner, and each is an iser per a dinner. So how many dinorim are there in a seller? So it's 4 times 6 is 24. So again, we'll do the cheshbon. So 1/24 of a seller, if it's degraded, becomes a question of oino. Okay, let's just accept it for a moment, because in the cheshbon, that's what it is. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Yehuda says, no, I have a different cheshbon. Arba pondinos, there is a coin called a punda. So 4 pindionos in a seller, pundan ladiner, and the 1 punda per dinar. So according to this, he says, then it would only be 1/12. So Rashi explains to us. We take a look. Kama tia sela chasera matbeya hayotze, a coin that's in the marketplace for Talmud who's sochek, but it's constantly handled, right? And it's rubbed, it's handled. And it starts losing its qualitative appearance. Kama techosa, how much should it lose? And it should be considered a no. I guess in our marketplace today, you might say that we used to be that we were dealing in silver coins. Today, a lot of the coins have alloys in it, no longer has silver. So in that respect, you might ask, okay, so if the silver made it worth a dime or a quarter, and now they're using alloys, does that mean because we're substituting an alloy for silver, it no longer has the chashivas of a dime or a quarter? And that should be no. There should be price fraud, because you no longer get a dime's worth of silver. You're getting a penny's worth of silver and 9/10 of alloy. Again, I'm just bringing it into our modern thinking. In those days, everything was of one. They didn't have alloy, so everything was of one cheshbon, whatever it was. It could have been copper, it could have been silver. I mean, most of the time silver was used, silver and gold sometimes. But if you keep rubbing it, you're going to lose some of the edge. And if you use the edge, says Rashi, that could be oino. So Rashi says, Dalet isurim l'sela. There are 4 isurim to a sela, isur l'dinner, v'hu echad michov daled bo, and it's 1 of 24, right? dinorim, Meya Kesev Dina Meya Shnei Pundakim, Pundak Shnei Yisrun Gemara Mafarish. Okay, so those are the denominations, either 1/12 or 1/24. Here's what Rashi asks, though. So keep in mind. Says Rashi, Umayshna, and the Gemara asks this question: Mayshna the Gabe Shas Torah on Minshtus. Why by merchandise do we say 1/6 is Aina? V'kan yesh omrim kach v'yesh omrim kach. Why by coin do we have a totally different concept of Aina, either a 12th or a 24th, whereas by merchandise it's a 6th? It's a Gemara kasha later on, we'll get to it, but I think that's what we want to bring out, is that there is a total difference in evaluating merchandise and coins. In merchandise, a 6th is shtus, and it's Aina. In coin, it's either 1/24 according to Rabbi Meir, or 1/12 according to Rabbi Yehuda. Now, Rabbi Shimon Omer, there's a third Manda Omar. Rabbi Shimon says, what does Rabbi Shimon say? Rabbi Shimon says, top of Nun Beis Amud Aleph, Shmona pundios, there are 8 pundios in a sela, right? And Shnei pundarim ledinar, 2 pundarim to dinar. So according to his cheshbon, says Rashi, Shnayim v'arboim shtus kishar oino. It comes out to a 6th. If you count 8 pundas for a sela and 2 pundarim for a dinar, then you're talking about a 6th. So according to Reb Shimon, shtus for coins is the same as shtus for schar. That's the point. In other words, there's a 3-way machlokes. Reb Shimon makes no distinction between fraud for coins and fraud for merchandise, because he's saying it's a 6th. Rabbi Yehuda says it's a 12th, and Rabbi Meir says it's 1/24. All right, we're going to get into that much later, but I just wanted to introduce that concept that according to at least Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, there's a different way of looking at shtus for coins for its value than there is for looking at at merchandise. Now, so let's wrap up the Mishnah. The Mishnah then asks a question: Ad mosai muter lahachzir. All right. So now we established that there is shtus by fraud by coins. So what's the time frame? We know from our Gemara that by schar there is an unlimited amount of time for a seller. We concluded that a seller, because he won't know until he gets back into the marketplace and sees other sellers, that he made a mistake, and that could be a huge amount of time. So therefore, we do not penalize him. But for the lokeach, we do penalize that it has to be the time that it takes to ask a friend, ask a vendor, because the lokeach has the merchandise. He can easily show it and say, all right. And the guy will say, oh, you overpaid, no question about it. But by the seller, since he already sold the merchandise, he won't know that he oversold, that he didn't sell it for the right number. So we give him an unlimited amount of time. Frek the Mishnah ad mosai muter lahachzir. Is the same rules apply by a coin as they apply by schar? Says the Mishnah, no. Bekrachim in the big cities, ad kidei shira l'shulchani. In the big city, there are money changers. So you, the seller, have the opportunity of going to a money changer and saying, I sold a bushel worth of this. He gave me this coin. Here's the coin. And the shulchani will say, you didn't do a good job. This coin isn't worth what you think it's worth. So he has the opportunity of going to a shulchani. Bikfarim, in the small villages where there are no shulchani, where there aren't money changers, ad arve Shabbos, Shabbosas, until Erev Shabbos, meaning you sold it during the week. Okay, you pocketed the money. When do you go out, you seller, to buy your Shabbos goods? Right, Erev Shabbos. So Erev Shabbos, you go out and you then you find a money changer, because then everybody's out there doing business, like Machane Yehuda on a Friday. So in other words, at least until you have the opportunity of engaging in Mekach and Memker, which is at least until the next Erev Shabbos. So Rashi, so the Mishnah is giving us parameters and of what it takes time-wise to complain. And once again, the Gemara is going to ask Akasha, why is this different? For a seller, we say that it's an unlimited amount of time. And here we're giving him constraints, either until you go to a money changer or you Erev Shabbos. Why not give him an unlimited amount of time, just like you did by Schaira? By merchandise, you said that he may or may not. Why isn't the same constraint? Oh, next Friday or whatever, or since you're in a big city money changer, why is there different rules for Schaira, for goods, as there is for money? That's a Gemara kasha later, but we're pointing out that the Mishnah is giving us these parameters which are different for money than it is for goods. Now, im hoya makira, what happens if the seller, no, not the seller, the buyer who bought the goods looked at the coin and he saw that the coin was defective? So now the buyer is aware that he is defrauding the seller, because he looks at this seller and he says, oh man, this seller doesn't look like a seller. It looks like a rubbed out piece of metal, but yet I'm going to buy the seller worth of goods. Do we put an onus on the buyer because he now knows he's committing a fraud by using a defective seller? That's an interesting question. He's now going to go ahead and buy a bushel worth of for a seller, but he knows the seller is degraded and isn't worth more than a half a seller. So he knows he's committing fraud. Is that okay, says the Mishnah? I mean, look at the different ways that the Torah, or in this case the Chazal, are angling this whole discussion, so that from every which way we should have an understanding what's right and what's wrong. Oh no, you go into the marketplace. I have this. Do I think about it when I take out a quarter? Do I worry if the quarter doesn't have George Washington on it, or he looks like Thomas Jefferson? What do I care? It's a quarter. The teretz is they were makbid. That quarter, that seller, has to be a seller. And if it's not a seller, then you're committing fraud. That's how careful Chazal was in us how we have to be scrupulous in the marketplace. Says the Mishnah, Im hoya makira, if the buyer recognized that the seller was not what it should be, then even after a year, after 12 months, that he, the buyer, should be open to the seller coming back to him and saying, give me another seller, this is fraud. In other words, we're going to flip the script, and we're going to say that if the buyer knew that he was intentionally, not intentionally, but intentionally, because he knew that it was rubbed out, if he knew beforehand that it was defective, then he has to be open and receptive to having the seller come back, because it could take up to a year for him to realize, oh, I have a bad coin here. So the Mishnah gives us an eye-opening that the buyer has to accept it back even 12 months. Ve'ein lo alav ela tarumis. But here there's the caveat. The caveat is he can't undo the deal, but he only has tarumis. What is tarumis? Tarumis is a complaint. In other words, it's not a monetary thing. This is interesting. The Mishnah is telling us that he can complain against him. A complaint in the marketplace says, oh, this person wasn't honest. He wasn't scrupulous. You can't go back and make him pay because it's gone, but you can raise a complaint which might affect his doing business with other people, because other people will say, oh, he cheated the guy. I don't want to do business with him. And I have to tell you, in practical matters, I have a situation that I'm involved with where I'm dealing with some people who I'm engaging in a transaction from somebody else. And they came to me and they said, you know what? We don't want to do business with that someone else. I said, why not? I mean, it's a very straightforward transaction. You know why? Because his reputation is that he didn't do right by other people. But I said to them, it has no effect on us. We're doing a transaction. We're buying something from him, let's just say. It's not as if he is going to defraud us. We investigated. We know that the item we want to buy is worth $100. We're buying it $100. but we're buying it from him. And they said to me, he has tarumas. There are people who complained against him. I don't want to deal with him. Do you see how far that goes? In other words, in normal Mekach and Memker, okay, some people have a better reputation, not a better. You don't want to make a deal with someone from whom you feel you can be defrauded. But if all the facts are in front of you, and you know what you're buying is $100, and you're buying it from someone who may or may not have a bad reputation elsewhere, but he's not going to affect me in this deal because this deal's $100. We checked it every which way to Sunday. It's not a question of our being defrauded from him, but yet these people say we don't want to deal with him. That's mamish the case of tarumas. So when a person has tarumas, you can see where that can affect him in the marketplace, that people will not want to do business with him. And that, says the Mishnah, is the upshot of, in other words, if you're an Erlich guy, we can't make you give us a different seller because 12 months have passed, but we can complain. And that so in other words, to avoid the complaint, you might be better off exchanging that seller that was rubbed out, the picture of George Washington, for a different seller in order to placate. That's how far the Chazal tell us we should go. So to finish the Mishnah, all right, so there is tarumis. And now, what is Masa Sheni? Masa Sheni is, I have goods that I harvested. I have to bring it up to Yerushalayim. I can't bring it up to Yerushalayim because I live too far away. It's going to spoil. What do? I exchange it for a coin or for coins. What happens if those coins are rubbed out? In other words, my Masa Sheni is worth $100, and I go to you, Scott, and I say, "You would take my Masa Sheni?" Of course, I'll take your Masa Sheni. Here are coins. Turns out the coins are not worth $100 because they're rubbed out. Is that, I know, is that fraud? Because you're giving me coins for the Masa Sheni that aren't worth $100. Says the Mishnah, V'nostel Masa Sheni ve'ena choshesh, and we don't worry about the chashash of ono. Why not? She'ena ela nefesh ra, because it's only a person. Listen to this. It's a person of ill spirit, nefesh ra, who is makbid on exchanging Masa Sheni for money that isn't pristine. So to do a mitzvah, because you have to exchange it, because you can't bring the goods to Yerushalayim, it's going to spoil. So we don't want you to bring spoiled goods, so you got to exchange it for money. If someone only has bad coins, and he says, I'll do you a favor, and I'll take the Masa Sheni so you have what to take to Yerushalayim. Turns out the favor is only 80% of what it should be, because the coins won't fetch 100% of what he exchanged. It's a bad-spirited individual who will have a taina. For me to have a taina on you, Scott, means I'm a nefesh ra. I'm ill-spirited. I'm not of goodwill because I have a taina on you. So again, Chazal is telling us that when it comes to a dvar mitzvah, if you're doing it intentionally and you have good coins and bad coins and you give me the bad coins, okay, that's on you. It's on you. You could have given me the good coins, you gave me the bad coins. But for me to have a taina on you, oh, you gave me rubbed out coins, you didn't give me the full value of the Masa Sheni, that's mean-spirited of me. So again, it's an interesting illustration how the Mishnah is parsing the different, yes, you have a taina, no, you don't, you can't collect, but you have tarumas, and in some cases you don't even have tarumas because it's a mitzvah, you shouldn't have tarumas. So again, we're touching on very interesting subjects, which again, Mitzvah Hashem will have a chance to discuss, but you see a whole different appearance of the whole inyan of Ainah when it comes to coins that we use in our transactions, as opposed to the goods in the transaction, which have a different value. So that Mitzvah Hashem we'll discuss further later on. But again, it's a whole different parsha. So Mitzvah Hashem in 2 weeks we'll pick up in Beis and Aleph. We'll review the Mishnah quickly and then go into the Gemara. Everybody should have a Freilich and Purim and the Nahapacha. This is really the time when we realize the hidden Nisim of the Rabbanu Shalom through the events of Esther and Mordechai in Shushan. And even though today we are in the midst of a terrible situation. The Ribono Shel Olam is doing nisim for us all the time, many of which we don't even know, because you never know in war what could happen and what doesn't happen. So we know the Ribono Shel Olam is looking out for us, even though Chaval, we have Karbonos, we have people. But again, this is a Nes Nister, it's a Milchemes Mitzvah. And so it's a combination almost of a Chanukah Purim event. But since we are in Purim, we say V'nahapacha, and the Ribono Shel Olam should give us all the schusim that we need to be menatzeach, especially now as we perhaps go into the final phase of the war. We should have no casualties, and the Ribono Shel Olam should give us only bracha v'hatzlacha. So everybody have a freilich and Purim, and Mitzvah Hashem will pick it up in 2 weeks.
Shkach.
Thank you very much. Everybody should be well.
Okay.
Sei gesund.